All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling one of the absolute titans of 20th century poetry, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Now, I know it has a reputation for being, well, difficult. But trust me, it's also this incredibly sharp diagnosis of the modern world, a world he saw as being shattered into fragments. So let's journey into those fragments and see what Eliot found there. So Eliot doesn't really ease you into things at all. Right near the beginning, he hits you with this line. It's just so stark, right? And it perfectly sets the stage for what this poem is all about. This deep spiritual emptiness, this existential dread that he felt was hiding just under the surface of modern life. This isn't about spooky ghosts or monsters. The real horror, for Eliot, was the horror of meaninglessness, that terrifying idea that everything we are, everything we build, could just crumble into a handful of dust. So, Section 1, A World in Ruins. I mean, that title says it all, doesn't it? What's the core problem that Eliot is wrestling with here? Well, you have to remember the context. This poem came out in 1922, right in the shadow of World War I. He's painting a picture of a civilization that is just shattered. And we're not just talking about bombed-out buildings. No, this is a much deeper thing. It's a spiritual and a cultural collapse. And right from the very first lines, Eliot just completely flips our expectations on their head. April is the cruelest month. Wait, what? April? The month of spring, of new life? We think of it as hopeful, right? But he calls it cruel. And you have to ask why. Well, think about it. If you're living in a dead land, a spiritual wasteland, then the promise of new life is actually painful. It stirs up old memories of when things were better, and it creates desires for a future that feels completely out of reach. It's like a rebirth that nobody asked for and nobody's ready to face. And this really gets us to the heart of the poem's biggest idea, its central metaphor. This wasteland he's talking about, it's not some actual physical place you could find on a map. No, it's the internal landscape of humanity. It's a spiritual desert. All the things that used to give life meaning, that used to nourish society, faith, tradition, real connection. In Eliot's view, they've all just withered and died, leaving everyone stranded. Okay, Section 2, Heap of Broken Images. Now, if you're going to write about a broken world, how do you do it? Well, Eliot's solution was pretty revolutionary. He created a style that felt broken. The poem is famously fragmented. It just jumps all over the place, different voices, different languages, snippets from history. And this isn't him just being difficult for the sake of it. The form of the poem is the point. It's meant to mirror the fractured state of the world he's describing. For, only a heap of broken images where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter. This line is absolutely key. Eliot is basically telling us, look, our modern minds are just a heap of broken images. That old idea of a single big story that makes sense of everything, it's gone, it collapsed. And what we're left with are all these disconnected pieces of culture, religion, history, just lying around. And by building the poem out of these very fragments, he forces us, the reader, to feel that same confusion, that same sense of being lost. And this fragmentation leads to a complete and total breakdown in one of the most fundamental human things, communication. There's this one section called A Game of Chess that shows this perfectly. Eliot gives us these two scenes that, on the surface, couldn't be more different. First, you've got this high society setting, an opulent but really sterile room where a conversation is just going absolutely nowhere. It's all artificial. Then, bam, he cuts to a noisy, working-class pub where the conversation is raw, it's about anxiety and infidelity. But here's the kicker. Despite the differences, the result is exactly the same. In both worlds, people are talking, but nobody is actually connecting. And in that high society scene, you get this absolutely heartbreaking plea. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. Wow, that is just such a raw cry for some kind of genuine connection, for a real conversation. But what does she get back? Basically nothing. Silence, scattered thoughts. It's the perfect picture of two people who are physically in the same room. Then you flip over to the pub scene and you have this one line that keeps interrupting everything. Hurry up, please, it's time. It's the bartender calling out that it's closing time. But it's more than that, right? It acts like this constant, mechanical, impersonal pressure. It just slices through any attempt at a real conversation, any chance for a moment of quiet reflection. It's kind of the soundtrack to modern life, always rushing, always pushing you along, never giving you a second to just be. All right, Section 3, Death by Water. So, given this spiritual drought we've been talking about, this world of failed connections, where does a life without any real meaning actually lead? The poem's fourth section is super short, but it gives us a really chilling and very direct answer. It's basically a big flashing warning sign. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell and the profit and loss. So let's meet Phlebas. He was a sailor, a businessman, totally focused on profit and loss, the bottom line, the material world, and now he's dead. And notice, the water here isn't cleansing or purifying, it just drowns him. His whole life, and now his death, is just a physical event. There's no spiritual dimension to it at all. And this isn't just some random little story thrown in, it's a direct callback. Remember the fortune teller from the beginning of the poem, Madame Sosostris? This is the exact fate she warned about. Her card said, fear death by water. She wasn't talking about literally drowning in the ocean. She was talking about a spiritual drowning, the kind of meaningless end you get when you live your whole life just skimming the surface of things. Okay, section 4, what the thunder said. So after all of that bleakness, we've had the spiritual dryness, the broken conversations, the warning of a totally meaningless death, the poem suddenly makes this huge, dramatic shift. It feels like we're finally moving on from just diagnosing the problem to desperately searching for some kind of cure. Here is no water, but only rock. Rock and no water and the sandy road. We have arrived at the absolute driest, most barren, most desperate point in the entire poem. The landscape itself feels hostile. The thirst is just overwhelming. And that quest for spiritual water, for any kind of meaning, is no longer just an idea. It's become a matter of life and death. Honestly, it feels like this could be the end of the line. But then, something happens. Out of what Eliot calls dry, sterile thunder, a new sound finally starts to emerge. And this is so important. The answer, the potential for rain, doesn't come from the Western traditions that have, in the poem's view, failed. Instead, Eliot looks to the east. He turns to the ancient wisdom of the Hindu Upanishads. The thunder is finally about to speak. So what does the thunder say? It speaks 3 commands in Sanskrit. First, datta, give. This means to surrender yourself in a moment of true, selfless giving. Second, diadvam, sympathize. This is about breaking out of the prison of your own ego and genuinely connecting with other people. And third, damyata, control. This is about getting a grip, exerting control over your own passions, and steering your life with some real purpose. This is it. This is the poem's proposed solution, a difficult, deeply personal, and very active path forward. So, section 5, fragments against my ruins. Okay, after this profound message from the thunder, you might be thinking, great, is everything fixed now? Does the rain finally come and make the wasteland beautiful again? Well, not exactly. The ending of the poem is way more realistic, and honestly, I think it's much more powerful because of it. Eliot is very clear on this point. There's no going back to some perfect past. The world is still fragmented. The chaos is still there. London Bridge is falling down. The commands from the thunder, they're not a magic spell that fixes everything overnight. They represent a really difficult, ongoing personal discipline. And this brings us to maybe the single most important line in the entire poem, the final unforgettable takeaway. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. See, the speaker doesn't find some brand new, perfectly whole system to believe in. That's not the answer. Instead, what does he do? He takes all those fragments, the bits and pieces of culture, literature, and philosophy that are left, and he uses them to build a kind of personal defense against his own ruins. The ultimate message is that meaning isn't something you just find lying around. It's something you have to actively build for yourself. So let's just quickly recap this whole incredible journey. Eliot paints a picture of a modern world that feels totally fragmented. Because of that, real communication and connection have become incredibly difficult. But there is a path forward, and it requires personal action. To give, to sympathize, and to control. And maybe the biggest takeaway of all is that each of us has to build our own meaning from the pieces that we have available to us. This poem was written 100 years ago, but its diagnosis of the world, man, it feels more relevant than ever, doesn't it? It leaves us with a question that's both deeply personal and totally timeless. In our own age of information overload, of social media, of fractured narratives, what are the fragments that you shore against your ruins? What are the pieces of art, knowledge, community, or belief that you use to build a life that feels meaningful? It's really something to think about.